now it's time to learn how things work and what's realistic and what's going to do this and what's going to do that. And the whole creative journey is, creativity, and it's bringing something into existence that was never there. And how are you supposed to bring something into existence that was never there on rules that are already set? So it's kind of like...
I like that.
Yeah.
Preach.
Welcome to the Kindling Fire. My name is Troy Mangum. God is preaching a sermon to the world through people's lives. People's experience, history, and testimonies all point to some amazing attribute of God that you too can experience. I interview revolutionaries, fire starters, and troublemakers. This podcast is here to be a voice of encouragement in your life. A voice that says, with God you can, and with God you will step into the abundant life. So let's get rolling. Hey guys, before we get started on this amazing conversation, I don't want to spoil who's going to be on the show. I'll wait for that for the intros. But I do want to just tease you with this one thing. At the very end of the show, the indie pop artist I have on the show has an unreleased song that will exclusively be released at the end of this podcast called Surrender. So you got to wait till the very end and give it a listen. Let's get started. So today on the Kindling Fire podcast, I got my buddies here and my son. I'm so excited. So we're going to be talking about living a creative life. And all of us in some way or another have kind of a bit of a creative passion. And so what I want to do is I just want to kind of go around the room. They can introduce themselves, talk a little bit about what you do creatively, and then we're going to get into the conversation. And this is David's office, by the way. It's an epic place to shoot. This is David. You probably don't know that, but let's start there. Let's go ahead and start with you.
Welcome to the inside of my brain, more or less. My name is David Weiss. I am a designer by both passion and training, and most of my career, as you can see around here, I love cars. Wanted to get into car design, but as a friend of mine said, the wheels fell off and I ended up doing boats. So it's mostly boat design, yacht design, that sort of thing. But I like getting into design of all kinds of products and transportation, that sort of thing. Done all kinds of different sorts of creativity over my career. Kind of an arsonist of creativity on the Kindling Fire podcast. Just set creative fires different places and try and pour gasoline on them appropriately. So that's what I do.
Appropriate fire burning where it's appropriate.
Exactly.
I love that you used appropriately. Let's go to you, Andy.
My name is Andy Poe. I'm a storyteller at heart. I've been a filmmaker. I've done radio, television, video production, theater, all sorts of things. So mostly behind the camera, as we say, directing and producing things. And also, I've something I wanted to do for a long time. I did photography and video work, but I always wanted to paint. So that's something I've been exploring, is painting over the last 15 years, actually. And I feel like I'm just getting started doing that. So mostly abstract design ideas, but I'm getting into like impressionist kind of ideas, like a bit Monet, a bit Van Gogh kind of ideas and stuff like that. So I love texture, I love color, I love the interaction of that. But to me, even painting is all about story. So to me, that's the exciting thing. But I just love being creative and making up stuff, and seeing where it goes. And half the time when I start an idea, I don't even know where it's going to go. I might start with like, I'm going to do something in blue or whatever, and then who knows where it's going to go. But that's part of the fun of living the creative life, which I think is something we're going to explore today.
So I use your painting as the podcast template for like the art that was used. So that's a painting that we have in our house called Sunflower. I believe it's called Sunflower. It's about a sunflower.
The Sunflowers.
The Sunflower. But
anyway, your wife tells me I still need to sign it.
Yeah. So that's some of Andy's work. Before we go to my awesome son, one last thing. You have a heart to do a podcast on creativity. You want to just say something about that?
Yeah, and it's still, it's been kind of on my heart or in my brain for years, which is the way ideas sometimes sit there and percolate. And I was actually in Colorado for a men's ministry retreat last fall, and I had an extra day, and I hung out and kind of sketched all this out. So here I am almost a year later, and I still haven't launched it, but my idea is something like this where I have conversations with creatives and we talk about what the process of creativity is, which I know is some of the things we're talking about today. But the idea is called the Artworks Cafe podcast. So it's like artists hanging out at cafes, and there's a lot of history there with writers and painters hanging out, around cafes and doing it. So my idea is the same kind of thing we're going to do today. Is sit around and talk to guys and see where it goes.
So people should Google that in about 3 months.
Yes, but depending on when this podcast is out.
Deadlines.
I do need that, a bit of a deadline.
We all do.
It's on the record, baby.
That's right.
All right, so
thank you for that.
So let's go to my son. So why don't you introduce yourself and tell us what you do?
I'm Olin. I'm the son of Troy, and
I like that.
I'm a musician, so that is kind of my creative avenue. So all things sound. So yeah, that's the short of it. I sing, guitar, produce, sound engineer. So I just like sonically kissing your ears, I guess.
I like that.
So how would you describe your music? What kind of how would you describe it?
My music, I would say, is definitely more like indie rock,
Genreless.
indie pop.
Yeah.
Just so abstract. I'm just way ahead of everybody. I just feel like
Nice.
yeah, no, but the indie rock, indie pop music is what I like doing. So I just do that.
Yeah,
It's really,
and
really good stuff.
performer, just fantastic, and I'm absolutely a fan. So hopefully as part of this show, I'll share a song or two, or at least
There'll be
where to
links.
Find out. There'll
Find
be
the
links.
links below.
Find
We
the
need a
links.
soundtrack under
Yeah,
this.
so he's on Apple, he's on Spotify. It's Olin with the slash.
That's right.
So you guys know me, I'm Troy, but creatively, I guess what I can say is that I just like a lot of things, and I've tried a lot of things. Obviously, this podcast is kind of a creative brainstorm of mine and the Lord's. Wrote a book, and so I feel like I find a lot of my voice in writing. And so part of the reason we're here is I've been kind of stuck. And I've been wanting to lean on you guys to kind of talk about the creative process and how you guys kind of work through that. So that's one of the genesis of this show itself. And then, I've dabbled in things. Like I love photography. I've been able to get into art shows with some of my work. So I just like a lot of things creative, and I certainly love this topic. So you guys just watch us have a conversation. We're not going to talk to you anymore. We're just going to talk to each other. So we do have a structure. So I wanna start off.
Hold on, we're artists and creatives. We struggle with structure.
That's right. No structure.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm going to read a poem to get us started. So I was exposed to this poem through a book called Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. It's a poet named Jack Gilbert, who is a fascinating character. But this is a poem he wrote called We Must Risk Delight. And what I want to do is I want to put it out here, and then I want you guys to listen, and then just whoever wants to respond, and we'll just go from there. I got plenty we can cover. So let's start here. We must risk to live. You must risk to live your most creative lives as a means to fight back against the ruthless furnace of the world. Without bravery, you will never realize the vaulting scope of your own capacities. Without bravery, you will never know the world as richly as it longs to be known. Without bravery, your lives will remain small, smaller than you ever wanted your lives to be.
Well,
That's a lot.
That's great. I think I love that he's sort of aggressive in sort of the call to creativity, because it's something that that quote about the artist is the child that survives in all of us, and there's something threatening to creativity, I think, to people in general, but it's also core to our being, but it's something that we tend to sort of beat out of other people, and I've definitely experienced that in my journey. But the almost threat there of, you want to live a small life, don't risk, stay in a box, don't create, don't try things, don't risk. So I love it. I think it's well articulated and relevant.
Yeah, I think, and I'm not going to give these stats right, but I was reading something where kids, like, first through, like, whatever, fourth grade or whatever, kindergarten, there's all creatives. Like 95% of the kids at that age, they think abstractly, they think outside the box. But as they go on through school, by the time you get to middle school or high school, it's down to like 5%. So the fact is, you take everybody that can be creative and you shrink them down, and, or as you say, beat it out of them, whether it's the system or the world or whatever. Yeah, so think about, so the ones that survive are the ones that, like, you fight through no matter what. It's I'm always excited, just as a painter and even as a writer, is when you look at the blank page. It's really scary sometimes just to look at a white screen or whatever, but it's also kind of exciting because there's so many possibilities there. But the world's going to tell you, you can't do it, whatever you do, it's not good. There's so much, even your own voices in your head, or maybe I'm the only one that has voices in their head, but
and you don't even need the voices in your head. I've been told multiple times, ever think about just getting a real job? Oh, like that's from a friend, like so there's definitely tension when it comes to creativity, I think.
So let me before I let you speak, I just want to say this thing: we're all at different seasons, right? And so I love that you're here.
Yeah.
Because you're early on when he has stories.
Great.
When he has stories up, I heard people say to this, you were probably in his kind of age range. Okay, so that's all I wanted to say. What were you gonna say?
Yeah, well, what I was gonna say is, like, I feel like kind of like the takeaway that I kind of like was getting from the poem is, and everything, is not that it's like kind of it, and instead of a sense of it being like, oh, like you need to take risk in the sense of like you need to live like a risk, I not like a risk-filled life, but like doing outlandish things. I feel like it's more so of a sense of like, I feel like being creative is a risk in it of itself, and kind of like it's you can't be realistic and be creative at the same time. Like they don't kind of fit together. And what you were saying was kind of like you have to embody this like childlike sense of thinking towards creative like things. And even what you were saying where it's like, the more older people get, the less creative they are. And I think that, well, the only reason for that is because you grow up, you go through school, and you kind of get this beaten into your head from everything being something that is of interest and so new and so unique because it's never been seen before by you, to it being, now it's time to learn how things work and what's realistic and what's gonna do this and what's gonna do that. And the whole creative journey is, well, creativity, and it's bringing something into existence that was never there. And how are you supposed to bring something into existence that was never there on rules that are already set? So it's kind of like,
oh, that's good. I like that.
Yeah.
Preach.
So
Mic drop.
Yeah.
No, that was good.
And I think that's, as artists, I won't say it's your job, but I think you're driven to see things in a different way. You feel the world. Like I was walking in my yard today with my dog and looked down and I'm watching a snail crawl between two blades of grass, and he's less than 2 inches long, but I'm just fascinated by him moving there and doing his thing. But I mean, if I'd have just been chasing my dog, which is what I do a lot, I would have missed that. But for a moment, I'm like stopping and seeing, part of God's creation and seeing the creativity of the snail. But to me, it's artists do that. We feel things. Some things overwhelm us, but at the same time, our job is to like see things in a different way.
So,
like you're saying, that don't exist. We see things that don't exist.
That the reason we're here is you can tell the snail story and all of us be like, wow, that's awesome. Right? Because it is. Because it's like, wow, you were able to slow down enough to see something so small and appreciate it. Whereas it feels like the world is just like, what is wrong with you? And it's like there's a real judgment on it, which is part of that bravery to be sort of like, well, I want to look at this, or I want to appreciate this, or I want to be sensitive to things. And it feels like there's an outside pressure to not be.
Oh yeah.
Does that make sense?
Oh yeah. All too well.
I love what you said about you're not gonna create new things following old rules. And
really
and
good.
the
Put that on a t-shirt.
Yeah, really. I mean, you think about the structure that we interact with out there in the world. I mean, structure is right and good and important in life and in many different places, but you also have to realize that the structures that have been built in the world around us are generally built by people that love structure. And so trying to interface with that is generally something where you're trying to plug in as a creative or avant-garde individual with something that, whether it be education or the professional world or something like that, there are a lot of structures built in those spaces, but those structures are built by people that love that kind of thing. But we still have to, the rest of us still have to deal with those structures, because the people that went there and built those structures first were people that are passionate about structure. And that's something that I've had to grapple with through school and through my professional life, etc. Is, I mean, if my wife was here, I could just point at her and say, don't, and she'll finish the sentence, which is something I say all the time: don't accept the world as it's presented to you. That's one of my things I return to over and over again, because the world will be presented to you in a certain way, and the one of the most fascinating things you can experience in life is pushing back on it and realizing it moves.
Nice. Nice. So I just was thinking truth. We have things packaged to us that say it's truth, but sometimes it isn't truth. So even your structure and your system you're doing, it may not be truth.
Well, somebody built that, and
So let me throw out another quote. So this is by the founder of Stussy. So Stussy was like a surf brand back in the day, and he said, the more creative a person is, the less they have an ability to see reality. Their reality is their vision, which is kind of what you were talking about. It's like, well, they have a problem seeing reality or seeing this, and I was like, I got a quote for that.
It's like that question I was asked: do you ever think about getting a real job, quote unquote real? Because what I'm doing is not reality.
I think it's this is just like a side comment about like saying like people will say like get like a real job, and like this it's funny because I feel like growing up in like just kind of like what I'm surrounded with like around just in my life is I feel like the struggle for me and like a lot of people that I know, which this kind of like ties into the first thing you were wanting to talk about, is not that it's this I feel like it's pretty accepted for people to have a unique job and like you should really go after like what you want to do. But I feel like where a lot of like the struggle for people like me and just like some people I know that I'm surrounded with is that there's a huge push now to mechanicalize it. So it's kind of like
it's
taking
the new structure.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So it's I feel
Same
like
as
with,
the old
put it
structure.
in a box.
Yeah. So for me it's like somebody, if I'm like, yeah, I do music, I feel like a big response I kind of get right now is kind of like, well, like what are you doing like every day, like what have you done, like this push to like build this giant resume and this giant you have to be always working and always doing this and always doing that, and which is been for me like leading into this slump of like, you know, I'm trying to be creative but I have nothing like almost fueling that creativity, which is like leads into, well, if I can't mechanicalize my creativity and I can't follow structure to get to that creative spot, how do I do that? And so that's also one of the books we were just talking about that I've been reading, the new Rick Rubin book. It's like A Creative Way of Life or something like that. And the first bit is talks about kind of like how you set yourself up to live creatively, and kind of like how he put it is that creatives, like you are not a creative person. Like you do not out of thin air come up with these ideas. That's not really how it works. It's more so of how you live your life, and live your life in a sense of like, in a way, like you're always going back to that childlike way of thinking where it's you're finding more things that you like, and you're living in a more present kind of curious way of living, I guess is a good way to put it. So it's kind of like not only the questioning your reality and not living by the standards of taking reality as it is, but going further as to always be in a state of trying to see what's different and why you like that, and kind of that's what fuels creativity, which I feel like there's almost a push against that, because you have to have this output all the time. And it's like it's kind of getting to a point where I feel like a lot of people don't take the time to make sure they're getting that input as well, you know.
Absolutely.
Wow, so good.
Well said.
I'm so glad you came on the show. Absolutely.
Yeah,
anybody want to respond?
I want to second that and say that having been in a relatively high pressure creative career for almost 20 years now, that pressure and that structure for creativity on demand, as I call it, is real, and it's something. It's not constant, but it is something that shows up fairly regularly, and as a result, one of the most crucial components for me has been to protect and curate and grow that curiosity and maintain it, and sort of, you know, almost like it's a plant or a garden or something where you know, if those leaves start to wilt a little bit, figuring out, okay, I gotta do something to, and it's weird because it part of creativity can and should be very organic and natural and just a normal outflowing, but at the same time, true creativity requires intentionality, intent, and as sort of a counterpart that sort of stands behind that intention, you need that fuel of that curiosity, that awe, that passion. And I've been through plenty of dry spells where I've sort of hit a wall, and those leaves of creativity start to wilt, and I just want to go lie down and eat ice cream. But I've over years I've learned where these fuels come from, and where I get sparked and caught on fire again, and it is pretty amazing to be able to go and protect that curiosity and feed it in an intentional way and see it come back to life. I've been in places in the last year where I hit a wall and felt like the tank was empty, and it's a tough spot to be as a creative, to not feel that spark and that inspiration and that pressure, that will to just like I jump out of bed in the morning. I've got this. I've got so much to share with the world, and to not feel that way. it feels very disorienting.
Well, it feels like death.
It feels like death.
I'm going to give you a
Yeah,
word.
exactly. It feels like
That's
death.
what it feels like to me.
But the amazing thing is you can answer that. You can plug back into the source. If you pay attention enough to the things that bring you to life, that make you come alive. And I've been in places where I've just felt that death for 1 or 2 or 3 days or longer even, but generally it's for me it's 2 or 3 days, and I can't stand it anymore. And I will clear the decks, and I will spend a whole day or a half a day just going to fill the tank. And it's amazing how effective it is. Like,
How do you fill the tank?
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going like that.
Yeah.
Let's do that. Like,
Well,
let's get into it.
Because I know how curious you are, because that's a word you
I am.
use over and
Yeah,
over again
it
when we
is.
talk.
There's different ways that I fill the tank different times. One of those is, you guys saw when you came in here earlier, but I constantly curate, because I'm a visual designer, and I'm designing all kinds of different products and shapes and solutions and forms and all of that sort of detail. And I have, I think, somewhere as close to 100,000 images in this inspiration image library that I make all of my computers slide through those in random order all the time. And even, it's not just when the screensavers are on. Even you can set it so your desktop background changes every 5 seconds or every 30 seconds or something like that, and it's pulling surprising things that you forgot about from that 100,000 images. And so that's one way to do it. And other ways are to I've identified artists, designers, directors, writers that really somehow tap something deep in me. And the mistake I think I made somewhat earlier on in life was to just sort of get zapped by something and go, wow, that's cool, that's great now, and just like the rocket goes off and off to the races, and without putting it like a bookmark at that place and like, this made a difference. And sort of giving yourself sort of a waypoint to go back to that later, rather than just grabbing that inspiration and shooting off to the moon. Take a moment and make a note. This thing hit me, and I'm going to make a point of capturing this in some way so that I can come back here. And so that's it's good. Movies, it's books, it's music, it's design, and it may be something completely different for you. It may be a snail in the grass, but like, find out what those things are and bookmark them. And also, I mean, look around, surround yourself with stuff that sparks you. Yeah.
So let's get practical. So what would you get in that space, and what
How to recharge my batteries?
Yeah,
or how
yeah.
I was thinking, I had a studio space in downtown Raleigh for several years, and I'm working on the wall and hanging pictures up and stuff, and I started reading books, and a guy I read several years ago said, you borrow from the past, you borrow from other artists, you borrow from other creatives, like musicians, composers listen to people before them, and you sort of steal ideas, but you're learning how to be the artist you want to be.
Yeah.
I started writing on I had a white wall to paint on, and I started making notes on the paintings, and then I started reading, and I come across a great quote in a book, and I started writing Bible verses, and I started writing quotes from Monet and Van Gogh and Hans Hofmann, who's a colorist and a teacher and stuff, and I just would write notes on the wall. And sometimes even then, when you're sitting in your space and you've got all these ideas up there, you're looking for a new idea, and I would just read these notes up there on the wall, and they would either inspire me or make me go, oh, that's a great idea. And one of the ones, and I can't remember who quoted this or who said this, but they were talking about being bored. And the fact that even, sometimes your tank runs out, but sometimes it's just you're bored. You've run out of ideas, or you're looking for something new. But the quote is to the effect that actually boredom is a friend of an artist, because it makes you think and stop and see something in a different way, kind of like what you're saying, something that doesn't exist. So to me, I'm inspired by what the artists do. I read a lot of like autobiographies and stuff. I just finished, I think it's called Mad Enchantment, which is about Monet and his life, and especially even toward the end, he's working on these giant paintings that are now, I believe, in the Louvre in France. But it inspired me because here's this guy who's been a painter his whole life, and people said he had the best eyes in the history of the art world. He could just see things, and he could paint colors and stuff, and he had all these gardens that inspired him. But here this guy is in his 80s, and he's struggling with his health. He's also struggling with how to make this thing work. Like, here's a guy who's been painting for 60 or 70 years of his life, and everybody's like, this guy's a genius, and he can't figure out how to make these things work.
And he's 80.
And he's struggling. So it inspired me that I can keep creating.
That's a really cool.
But also the fact that, here's a guy who's done this his whole life, and he is a painter, and he's one of our masters, and he struggles with that. So that inspires me, is the fact that I'm borrowing ideas and figuring out how other people live their lives on the journey and stuff. To me, I love music. I love seeing a live band, lots of different kinds of music. That's inspiring. Walking into an art gallery is inspiring. I love being outside. I mean, I'm a bit of a sunflower in that I need the sun. The winter, I start kind of winding down a little bit. But to me, I love being outside. I love fresh air, hiking, camping, anything like that. So sometimes just even traveling, rolling the windows down. On the way over here, we've got a really nice day today. The weather's great. I had the windows rolled down. I have the music playing in my truck, and I'm driving over here, and I'm just like, I've got phone calls to make, and I'm like, no, I'm going to go talk about creativity. So I need to kind of get in this zone, in this space and stuff. So, but like you said, what cultivates my heart? What do I feel that I need?
And I do want to say that it's something I meant to mention, but there are times where going back to the same well, that well might be dry, and something that I also will do is like with those images that are spinning on my devices that I design on and that sort of thing. There are periods where I've seen the same stuff a few times, and it's just sort of it was sparking for a while, it was hitting for a while, and it's not anymore. And I'll go in and scan through some stuff, and seen that 1,000 times, seen that, and I'll pull that into an archive, and then I'll dedicate a period of time to go hunt new stuff, and it might be similar, but it's truly fresh, it's truly new. And so like keeping the tank not just full of stuff that you already know works, but being open to discovering new kinds of fuels is another piece of the puzzle.
I just had a quick thing on that. I used to be, when I had my art studio, there were several artists down the street, and there was a painter down the street that I'm a big fan of, and I would go in and hang out and talk to her. And one day I'm in there and I'm watching her paint, and she's been doing this for 45 years, and I'm like, why does your black look different? And she's like, oh, it's got blue in it, or it's got yellow in it, or something like that. So even talking to other artists, it's like, how did you do that? Oh, I mean, mine's not going to look like yours, but now that gives me something to chew on and think about. Yeah. Now I go back and figure out, how do I make my black look like that? Or,
Yeah, that's good. I know we've kind of been going, so do you have anything you want to offer?
Well, I got a couple of things that some of them are just like comments to what y'all were saying, and kind of like just something I've been thinking about while y'all were talking is because kind of thinking back to like, we were supposed to be answering like what we kind of do to recharge those like creative batteries, and like what kind of gives us that new inspiration. And I feel like kind of to back it up, and you were saying some of the hardships of like trying to find that, it's like things get bland, but also boredom could be an artist's best friend. So that's a lot. But also like for me personally, I was thinking about like when I think about like music, for me it's just like the avenue that I know the best creatively, so that's what I'm gonna use. So it's like with music, when I'm sitting down to write a song, just like kind of what I think in my head is I'm like, all right, like the best songs in the world are going to be the most genuine songs in the world. And so I think that's true for most art, that the best art in the world is the most raw, unhinged emotion that you can put into whatever you're doing. And so for me with music, it's kind of hard sometimes to sit there and be like, well, I don't know what's genuinely like me at this moment. And so it's kind of like I've been kind of shifting my view on that to kind of be like, it's not the only thing that makes it the most unique is kind of like it's a thought. It's not like a sentence or like I guess like not your art is not a statement. It's like a thought process, and that's kind of like I feel like where you find the beauty in art, whether it be like a painter is painting something, and like Van Gogh probably just was like doing whatever, like throwing stuff at a page, or maybe had a idea of what he was gonna do, and then he messed up, got upset, and now there's this part of the painting where he kind of was maybe thinking he was ruining it because he was so upset, but turned it into something beautiful, and now people can look at it and be like, oh, like that's like I don't know what they would say, be like, oh, this chaos and beauty like come together to create this process of thought. So it's kind of like helping artists in a way. It's like we use that avenue to like go through those things. And now to bring it back a little bit, like when I think about like trying to create the best art and like what I do to recharge that, sometimes I get stuck in this spot where it's like I don't know, like I'm not gonna sit here and act like I know myself fully right now, or like I know everything. I can deconstruct every thought, every feeling, and so that I can present the most true piece of me, whether it be like music or whatever I'm doing. And
it's one of the hardest things to do.
Yeah.
To know yourself.
Find your voice.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it.
And so when I think about like kind of getting that back, for me it's more so like whatever's new. I feel like I'm trying to find some more things that are like kind of like things I can go back to and do consistently, but it's like for me it's just like kind of like going to places where I feel like I feel the most, whether that be like wherever I can kind of get out of my head. So whether that be like I feel like nature is a big one for me, just like being outside, being around family, like anything that makes me stop thinking and just kind of like being, which is like so important. And to just like to be and think. But also another side of that for me that I've been finding a lot of like inspiration is that like just like I feel like that a lot of things that like in the creative space that at least I don't hear too much is like just with like God and everything, like having getting to like know God and stuff has really been kind of like rejuvenating some of that creativity for me, because it's kind of going back to a sense, because it's like I'm never gonna understand God, but the fact that I'll never be able to do that, and that I'm always can learn these things and feel things that I've never felt before through him, brings up a whole new perspective on things and kind of helps me.
Well, and he's a creator, and he wasn't a creator back at the beginning. He was then and is still creating now, like, and even in the world to come. Like, I think that you know, it's part of the character of God to create, and part of what he put into us.
Yeah, I think you would say he wasn't only a creator.
Right.
Yeah, at the very beginning.
And right, correct. And he's not going to stop being a creator at some point. That's part of his nature.
Yeah.
And it's also in us as well.
Let me give you an Oswald Chambers quote. It says, "The call of God is like the call of the sea. No one hears it but the one who has the nature of the sea in him." I'll say it again. The call of God is like the call of the sea. No one hears it but the one who has the nature of the sea in him. And I want to translate this. And the call of God to create, the compulsion, the desire, the drive, the allurement, the pull of God to want to. He's made us in a certain way. He's made his creation in a certain way to have a desire to create.
Yep.
And that call is like no one can hear it. They're kind of like, well, why do you want to do this? Or why do you want to do this? Or why would you do that? And why wouldn't you do something else? It's just like when you feel that compulsion and that pull and that almost like God is like around the corner, like saying, come here, I want to show you something. Mm-hmm. And you catch a glimpse of God saying, I want to show you something. I want to take you somewhere. Mm-hmm. People that have it in them, the nature of the sea, the call to create, that creative spark, they get pulled by that. Mm-hmm. And not everybody has that and gets pulled by it and is interested in it. Not everybody would think this is an interesting conversation. But to me, I love this conversation.
Yeah.
Because every part of it is a piece of a puzzle that I can be like, I can use that. I could take that. Mm-hmm. That can help me. Right?
Yep.
I don't know if you guys feel that similar.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I think we've been having this conversation for years, the three of us, and you're involved now, and
we've been having this conversation.
You guys, but we've sat around campfires, we've had dinners. You know, we've run in the same circles for several years. I'm thankful David introduced me to you several years ago, and it's so, and that comes up a lot because David mentioned a few years ago about how each of us have like a tiny facet of who God is and a tiny glimpse of that. And I think some of us are a little more tuned in some ways, and we feel it. So it's that call to the sea. It's when you like see a sunset or you're hiking on a mountain to me, and I just like, oh my gosh. This was about a year ago. I was up in the mountains and I was hiking with my dog, and it's like 4th of July weekend, and I'm up there and I go up to a ridge line in western North Carolina, and it's above where we have a little house, and I go up there because at the end of the day, if it's not raining, it doesn't matter the weather otherwise, because I've been up there and the snow's been up to above my knees. I want to watch the sun go down. Mm-hmm. And so I go up there, my dog's running around doing his thing, and I'm watching the sun go down, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, that was so beautiful. And I said something like, thank you, God. And he says, thank you. And I said, for what? And he said, you came up here. And I'm like, oh. And I said, well, this is where you say, oh, wait a minute. Well, it's not just me. You created a sunset for everybody. And he's like, but you came up here to see it. And that always gets me, because I'm having this short conversation with him because he's like telling me that he created this sunset just for me.
I think any artist can relate to somebody else seeing our art, whatever it may be, and going, oh, wow, that's a precious moment where somebody sees the same vision, that you spent hours or days or months or years creating, and somebody goes, that's great.
So that is why we're here, because
nice.
If you think of God as a creator with all these concepts and ideas and beautiful nature and all this stuff, and we get to see it, think of how the heart of God just leaps.
Amen.
Because what you just said, I've totally experienced that. If I've ever done anything and somebody said, thank you, I see it, I see you, I see the value, I see what's behind it. Yeah. It just does something inside of you that just says, this is worth it.
And God
I should
himself
do more
is not
of it.
above that.
And that's my point. God, when we take a moment, his emotions towards that is like, it's like we are a reflection of that.
Yeah.
We just taste a tiny sliver of that. Yeah. Think of when we turn to God by our own choice and say, I see that.
Yeah.
I see that, God. I see the value of that. I never saw that before. I never felt that before. Yeah. I never crossed my mind before. But I see it. Like that has just got to bring the joy of God. Like, you see it.
The crux of existence is right in there somewhere.
Yeah. It's I've come across the word wonder this year. I was doing a workshop where you put pictures on the thing, and I know you guys have done this, and it's supposed to reveal things about you. And there was travel and all these other things and creative things, and there was food, and and I came up across the word wonder. Food. We're all pro food.
Yes, we are.
We are eating after this, right?
Yes, totally.
That's the only reason I came. I heard there was food. So, but I came across this picture, and you're supposed to clip all these pictures out and then throw them in a pile and just randomly try to select. And I'm trying not to overthink it as a visual person. I end up with this one photograph of like a sign that's in a store, probably in Germany or somewhere. It's a neon sign, and it just says wonder in a window, but it's spelled with a U. It's WUNDER, and I put it on there, and so I'm in a small group kind of like this, and we're working through exercises where we're trying to understand each other's journey and life and what brought us to this point. And this was a men's weekend, and we're talking, and the guys around there, I just met these guys, and I'm hanging out with them for the weekend, and they all looked at me and like, they say, you have wonder everywhere you go. I'm like, what? And they said, we've walked with you across the camp and watched you stop and look at something, or we've seen you like do this. And they said, that word sums you up. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I never thought about that. So to me, the wonder of creation, the wonder of snails, the wonder of light, and I'm trying to use that word more and more this year. So today it came to me, I was like, oh my gosh, this is what I've been trying to figure out for the whole year now.
It's not a word that's that common in the society's lexicon these days, but it is so powerful.
When you incorporate the appreciation, there's this wonderful verse that David wrote. It says, I praise you, God, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made.
Yes.
What's so great about that is David is saying, I praise the Lord for how you have made me.
Right.
So you having a moment of saying, oh, I'm that way? Well, yeah, I do like that. God has made you that way. And when you embrace that, and you say, that's not a bad thing, or I don't need to hate on that, or I don't need to criticize that aspect of my personality, or think about it from other people's perspectives. Think about it from God's perspective. I love that. I've made you that way. You enjoy that? I enjoy you having that. I enjoy you wondering and embracing that. So many artists beat ourselves to death. I am this way. I am that way. I wish I wasn't. I wish I wasn't. I wish I had this. Or why am I so sensitive? Or all the things.
Right.
But what if we took a step back and said, I praise you, God, for I'm fearfully and wonderfully made, just like I am, to see things the way I do, to feel things the way I do, to think the way I do, and to be able to create out of that. And then wouldn't that be like an act of worship? Wouldn't that be just something that would delight the heart of God? Because it's then us being how we're wired to be. We're enjoying it, and He's enjoying it. But that's that, that world is just crushing you. It's trying to get that thing out. Does that make sense?
The tortured artist sort of thing is that is a common sort of piece of language, and to me that's yes, I get the sensitivity and the torturedness of potentially not accepting the world as it's presented to you and all the potential strain and trauma that comes with that, but that to me is looking at it upside down. Like it's an invitation to sharing in the grand arc of creation itself. That's deep.
It's very cinematic.
Well, you think about the first recorded interaction between the immortal and the mortal is God inviting Adam to name the animals. He's inviting Adam to join in the creative process. Like, that's the first recorded interaction.
Seriously?
Yeah. His invitation to, I believe so. Check me if I'm wrong, but I believe that is, if not the first, it's one of the earliest interactions. Is invitation into God's just finished creating this glorious universe,
right?
That he's put us right in the middle of it and said, "All right, we're going to keep going. We're going to keep creating.
You got work.
You're going to do it with me."
Yeah.
And so to me, that's that's why anybody, like when people find out I'm a designer or creative, I so often get I can't draw a straight line, or I can't even draw a stick figure or something like that. And that saddens me, because there is a creator in the core of everyone.
Right.
It's not well, I'm not a creative type. Yeah, but we define creativity too narrowly.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good.
True. And I had a boss a while back that we were designing a boat, and then we had to shift gears and start writing a proposal for a new project. And he said, we got to stop the creative part and do this part now. And I said, no, if we don't tell a good story and keep our creative juices flowing when we're writing this proposal, we're dead in the water. Like so too narrowly defining what creativity and making everything new,
which is revelation.
That's a lot broader than we give it credit for.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
I want to give him a chance. You got
Go
something
ahead
to respond to?
No, I was just gonna say that's 100% true. I feel like most people neglect that they're creative at all, but it's like there's creativity in like every day. Like
absolutely.
Like I feel like a salesman. Like the best salesman is gonna have a pitch that nobody's ever used before, and he's gonna get all these sales, or somebody pitching for an ad, or like some just practical like business jobs or whatever. It's like if you're not creative, like you're not gonna do a good job. And it's also like people that like you can't limit the creativity too. So it's like an engineer, or an architect, somebody who just designs buildings, is like this guy's like I'm gonna hire somebody to build my building in like, I don't know, some made up city, but this is gonna be the biggest building in the city. Are you gonna is the guy gonna go with some dude who's lived in the same town his whole life, does everything very by the books, very like ... like just very just straight and narrow guy, doesn't really do too much? Or you're gonna get, but he's also a designer, and he just designs like block buildings, like they're all just blocks? Or are you gonna go with the guy that all year round he's going from city to city, maybe designing one building a year, but that building's renowned because it's so beautiful, because he's taken every minute of his life looking at what he likes to do, which is like looking at architecture and finding
and
what he likes
too. The engineers are going to have to come up with new solutions. It may be just math, but they are going to have to come up with creative solutions for that building. Like the creativity. Like creativity breeds creativity. Yeah. If I design a weird boat, I have the naval architects and the marine engineers going, whoa, I haven't really done one like this before, and it invites the whole team into the journey of let's get out on the ledge and try something new. Whether that's the math of figuring out the structure, what kind of materials to use, or the structure to use, or just this sort of the more soft side of the design. All of it is, it creativity breeds creativity.
Yeah,
that's when it's fun and scary if you're on that front edge. I know you surf, so on the front edge of that wave is like you're like, oh my gosh, I'm doing this. I'm
the drop-in moment.
Where are we going with this?
Yeah, the drop-in moment.
So yeah.
I cut you off a little earlier, so anything you want to?
Well, I was going back to Genesis because I always like to use two of my favorite verses. Ephesians 2:10, we're created as in God's image to be creative. His workmanship is to be creative. But to me, in the beginning, God created. So the fifth word in the Bible, and the very first thing he really does is create, and he speaks into creation. But this hit me sometime in the last week or so, because I know one of these days I'm either going to be a sculptor or a potter or something, because I love painting, I love color, but I love the way things feel. And I'm just curious about how they, interact and shapes and stuff. And several artists over the years have transferred, or moved from painting to, sculpting and stuff. And it hit me that, God spoke the universe into creation. He used his voice. He spoke the planets in. He spoke the earth in. He gets to Adam, and he actually puts his hands in the dirt.
Nice. Yeah.
And he's a potter. He shapes Adam from the dirt. And so he actually, whether a guy gets his hands dirty, metaphorically, whatever you want to say there. The fact is that he spoke all this, but to us, when he created us, the intimacy of him putting his hands into us and physically just creating us from. And I can't imagine what that moment was like for the Trinity. You know, they're watching, you know, the Holy Spirit and Jesus, and God's doing this. I don't know what that looks like, but to me it's like, oh my gosh, what just happened there?
Yeah, no, that's
You know?
epic. Well, I'm gonna end us on this thought and have us kind of all respond and then say our last words. So this is a C.S. Lewis quote, and it says, "In each of my friends, there is something that only some other friend can fully bring out. By myself, I am not large enough to call the whole man into activity. In each of my friends, there is something that only some other friend can fully bring out. By myself, I am not large enough to call the whole man into activity." And just as a side note, C.S. Lewis reigned with the Inklings, which was a group of writers. J.R.R. Tolkien, who wrote The Lord of the Rings, was a part of it. And they ran in this community for many years, encouraging, critiquing, walking alongside them as collective artists. So,
predictably, that was my favorite quote of all the stuff that you shared with us before.
really?
Oh, yeah.
Why is that? Just share
Just
that.
because Lewis is, he's another level.
Yeah, he really is.
I just just chose a Bible study group this past week specifically because they're studying the Great Divorce. Like, oh, everything else just lost. Going right there.
Great book.
It is. It changed the way I think about reality, but it kind of ties back to the thing that you mentioned earlier about each one of us sort of having unique facets of God in us, that He's entrusted parts of Himself, unique, singular parts of Himself to each of us, but just as with any complex, beautiful jewel covered in facets that bounce light around, that one facet it needs the other facets to have light bouncing around inside that gem to have that the ultimate possible beauty coming out of that piece of that creation. And so, you know, it's crucial to be in community. I can't say it much better than Lewis did. There are things in us that there's no way for you to just go Lone Ranger out there. You'll miss a huge chunk of what's possible if you're just doing it alone. Yeah. And one of my favorite quotes, Reggie Watts quote, "When in doubt, zoom out." And I love the simplicity of that, and that I find to be true so many ways, but especially when it comes to community and sort of zooming out and reconnecting, because we're designed for sharing, connection, creativity, and none of those things work very well in a vacuum.
No, amen. So, any other responses to that one? That was it's good.
This is the answer to that statement, that question. The fact that, you know, each of our
Us
hearts
sitting
are
here.
like resonating right now because we're all like, oh, dude, really?
Yes, yeah.
That's what you think? Or that, oh, I hadn't thought about that. But yeah, and stealing from David that statement, the facets and stuff of God, we get little glimpses of that. So to me, this is that community. This is that, you know, whether you call it iron sharpening iron or like we like resonate together. I mean, you know, whether it's a musical thing, there's so many things that just happen, even us sitting around here doing this conversation, to me.
Well, it
just stirs so many thoughts and elevates my own desire to go back and create again and come back and share it.
Yeah.
and show it off and say, what am I doing here? Is this working?
There's a musical thing where if you hit the on a guitar or somewhere, you hit a note like an A, and there's a string that can respond to that A. By you hitting it by itself, the vibrations will actually resonate on the other instrument.
I've seen that done. I've seen this happen.
And it's sort of like saying it's resonating on the same frequency. And I think that is very much how the heart of God is that he's wanting a community to resonate around a similar frequency, not compete with each other, not try to conflict with each other, but try to be like, yes, that's awesome. You know, and we all need that encouragement. We also need hey, that could be better, you know, but it's done within the context of others. So, well, I'll say let's kind of end it there. Any last words? You want to end us?
Sure. Sure.
Come on.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess my final words of today, to kind of summarize a little bit and add a little bit, is that, you know, if you want to be a creative person, live a creative life, which means experience and feel as much as humanly possible. And I feel like receiving is just the best thing you can possibly do as an artist. So just live, make sure that you get out of your own way and kind of just be present and appreciate life and how God has made you, and how you will never understand everything. You can only be curious about everything. So, you know,
You're here.
There we go.
You're here. I can't say it better. So, guys, hope you enjoyed it. You got it. There's gonna be so many links. You have to go check them all out to go check out some of the stuff that we put our hands to. So, thanks, guys. That was amazing.
Thanks for the invite.
Thank you.
As promised, guys, this is Olin with his new song, Surrender. Enjoy.
You're such your mama's boy.
Guys, thanks for listening to the podcast. I am doing a YouTube channel, so we do video formats of these podcasts, and we'd love to have you look there. Okay, guys, until next time, be awesome.